America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation. And today we're joined by Kathy Barnette. She is a veteran, former adjunct professor of corporate finance, conservative political commentator, and weekend host of Philadelphia's #1 news talk radio station, WPHT. She also ran for the Republican nomination in 2022 in the U.S. Senate race in Pennsylvania. She's also the author of Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to have you. We met, just to give the audience some background, we met at our recent summit and gala in Savannah, Georgia, May 1st and 2nd. It was our second Freedom Fighter Summit and Gala. And you brought your show there and you parked right outside the conference room, and you spoke to, I think, every single person who was at the summit. You helped create a mood out there. I think I mentioned to you that was fantastic. People loved the networking. One of my favorite moments was when I walked by and saw you sitting there with, five Hispanic women who had some of them had been on the panel for the Hispanic vote. I just thought it was fantastic. It was so great meeting you and having you join us at the summit and bring your show and talk to everybody there.
Yeah, and I was so very grateful to get the invitation and for JCN opening up their doors and for allowing me to park my little radio station right outside the door and to be able to engage with so many wonderful people. Like, where do we have, and this was a very substantive, right? I am a conservative. If anyone knows me, they actually came up with the word ultra MAGA just to describe me. I'm all about making America great again, all about America First principles. And so I've been to a number of these conferences. This was no fluff. This was very serious, very substantive, and very happy. A lot of smiles. And so it was a wonderful opportunity to sit down with the people who actually create the jobs. And so the fact that JCN has their finger on the pulse at such a time in our country, where I believe the shift of focus is shifting away from being overly obsessed with Wall Street, coming back to Main Street. I think this is such an opportune organization, as well as the timing of that conference. So I was excited to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. And we really thought a lot about how we would approach the summit and the topics. They were focused on not just sort of the win in November with, the Trump administration coming into office and what that brought, but also like how we actually chart the way forward on those topics. And one of those topics, I mentioned you were sitting there with 5 Hispanic women, and we did have a large Hispanic presence in the audience. And we had a panel dedicated to the Hispanic vote and the importance of it, because President Trump in the November election hit a new high water mark for the Hispanic vote at 46%. Wow. And the reason behind that is it's worth talking about. It's worth dissecting it. And that's what we were trying to do, was dissect it and try to figure out how we grow that, because one of our panel members, John McLaughlin, who's also a pollster for us, a pollster for President Trump, he told us flat out, he was very blunt on that panel. He said, you rented this vote. And if you don't work for it, you will not keep it. And I think he hit the nail on the head.
I love that. I love that. Yes. And he also is going to be, I captured him at one of my interviews there at JCN. And he's just straight to the point. I loved it. You know, right after the November election of Donald Trump last year, I looked at one of the polls that came out. Every single group of people, however you want to break them out, Black, white, Hispanic, suburban, urban, educated, not educated, male, female, however you want to break it out, every single group of people moved towards Donald Trump. Every single one. The only group of people who did not move towards Donald Trump was 65 and over. And I asked John McLaughlin about that. And he said, you can't teach old dogs new tricks. I don't know. That's what John said. But I thought it was interesting that every single group of people in our country is recognizing what you and I have probably always recognized, is that something has gone fundamentally wrong with the way our country is being ran, and something has to happen. I think we all feel this sense of squeeze. We all feel this sense of impending. We don't know what we're on the precipice of, but we feel like something has to change. And I think that is what brought so many different groups of people who probably would have never thought in their lifetime that they would be voting for Donald Trump of all people. And yet they were there because this was the only person who consistently since 2016 kept his finger on the pulse of what it is we were thinking about our open borders, about our place in the world, about our economy, boys and girls sports, all of these different things. Donald Trump was the only one on both sides of the political aisle who was willing to stand up and say the quiet parts out loud. And that resonated with a lot of people.
You know, I couldn't agree more. I absolutely couldn't agree more. And to hear some of those panels talk about not just the problem facing the country, whether it was our education system and working towards education freedom across the states in the country, or getting this one big beautiful bill passed and expanding and extending the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and making them permanent, which we'll talk about that too. You know, the debt and deficit and the problems there that we're facing as a country in not getting this reckless spending under control. When you sit there and listen to these experts, some of them just small business owners, some of them were members of the administration. We had Administrator Lee Zeldin speak. Yes. We had the SBA Administrator Kelly Loeffler. Senator Joni Ernst spoke. We had some people who really brought Washington to Main Street with those messages. And I think that the audience there really appreciated hearing that, but they also appreciated the opportunity to speak and be heard.
Absolutely, right. And you and I were talking before we came on live, is that people have a story. Everyone has their story, and people want to be heard. And that's what I found there. Think about what you guys are representing. Over 30 million small businesses throughout our country. They employ over 90 million Americans, which make up almost 50%, around 46% of our GDP. And yet no one is really talking about small businesses or middle America. We hear a lot of conversations about the top 10%, who, by the way, has an exaggerated amount of concentration of wealth right now. We also hear a lot of conversations about the bottom 50%, but no one really talks about middle America. I can't think the last time I heard during a political season campaign where politicians even were talking about middle America. Everyone kind of focuses on those two extremes. And yet we are almost 50% of the GDP. And quite frankly, we're paying for the top 10%. It's our productivity that has made these people so wealthy. When you look at these charts from 1971 to today, and you see almost like a hockey stick of where wages has remained almost stagnant, and yet our productivity has just skyrocketed up, and we're not getting the benefit of that. So again, an organization like JCN, just you have your thumb on the pulse of where the people are, because I think We're in a state of despair. I feel the squeeze. When I ran for U.S. Senate here in the state of Pennsylvania against Mehmet Oz and many others, I was traveling over 1,500 miles every single week. I didn't have the $60 million they spent, but I had the energy and the time and the passion. And I have a better way of telling our story, which I think our story is the best story to tell. I just think we keep picking people who suck at telling our story. And as I was traveling all across the state of Pennsylvania, I'm looking in the eyes of these Americans and they want what I want. I was generally the only Black person walking into these Republican spaces. And yet I felt like I was their sister in the fight. I felt like I was one of them, that we were all in this together, because their issues are my issues. The things I'm talking about around my kitchen table, they're talking about it. And we feel the squeeze. There is a tremendous amount of despair that is all across our country. And then I jumped on the campaign trail with Vivek Ramaswamy. I was the first person he brought onto his campaign when he was at zero in all the polls. And we're traveling all across the country at this point, and it's the same. It's not just here in Pennsylvania. It is all throughout our country. I don't care if you're in the suburbs or if you're in urban areas, if you're in the country, if in rural areas or city, there is a squeeze. And I think John is right. We have rented the votes of these different groups of people. And I believe it starts right now with this reconciliation bill. Donald Trump's been in office for a little over 100 years, and he really hasn't had to pivot to Congress for much. And now it's their turn to step up. And I think we're all going to be paying attention to what our legislators, specifically Republicans, do at this moment with the spotlight on them.
You mentioned running for office. Tell me what that was like. What was that like? What brought you to that decision where you said, I want to jump into this hornet's nest and run for office? You're a Black conservative. Like you said, your issues were everybody's issues. And so you were bringing that story to the table, but you were also bringing your own personal story. What made you run for office?
You can put the spotlight right back on what I was just saying, is that I feel the squeeze. I never thought in a million years someone like me, would run for office. I grew up on a pig farm in Southern Alabama. I grew up below the bottom rung of the economic ladder. I grew up in a home with no insulation, no running water, an outhouse in the back, a well on the side. I often say we were so poor, we couldn't afford the other O. We were just po, but I was loved. I was loved. I felt loved. I felt protected. No one ever looked at me in those moments and said, Kathy, you might as well hang it up, kid. You're Black, you're a woman, you're poor. You can't do anything. No one ever told me that, right? And as a result, I became the first in my family to go to college and graduate. I spent 10 years in the U.S. military, where I was accepted into officer candidacy school. Wall Street environment, spent a lot of time there with A.G. Edwards and Bank of America Capital Asset Management, which now I'm learning how money works and how policies actually impact the flow of money, where money flows and where it doesn't flow. Corporate America, adjunct professor, and all of these different things. And now I am homeschooling our kids because I saw 10 years ago, my husband and I'm a little bit of a conspiracy. But like I said to you, I have
At least
to come.
You admit it.
I don't care, because everything came true. Everything I said, right, has come true. I'm having to come up with new ones. But I saw 10 years ago where our education was going with the whole transgender movement and several other things that the school system was doing. And I was like, you're not touching my babies. And so I left corporate America and all that I was doing to homeschool our children. And now we're 6 years into homeschooling our babies. And I'm looking at the world, at what my children are going to one day inherit. And I'm like, I'm concerned we may not even have an America. At the rate at which we're going and selling our nation off to the highest bidder, and in this squeeze that I began to feel and see on middle America, I'm concerned at that point, we may not even have a country for my children to inherit. And so then I began to pray, went to Israel. I said, I jokingly say I made the mistake of saying to God, "Here I am, Lord, use me," as a blanket statement. And when I came back, He began to open up doors and began to open up my understanding about this world of politics and
Mhm.
potentially running. And so I went from 0 to 60 of jumping into my first race with very little resources, very little knowledge. But once you get out there and start sharing your story, it was amazing how many people came alongside us. And then in 2022, I decided to run for US Senate, which is almost the equivalent of running a national campaign. And I had three people who I paid, a driver, a scheduler, and one field director. But I had hundreds of volunteers. People would work an 8 hour shift and then come and pull another 8 hours for me. I had people picking up yard signs in Pennsylvania, just to Philadelphia, just to drive them over to Pittsburgh. Everyone was involved, and so that encouraged me, because I felt like I may be the tip of the spear. I'm speaking what others are feeling and what they believe, but it wasn't just me out there. I'm just a tip. There's another whole shaft that comes along with that spear, and I just happen to represent them. And those values that led me to run are still my values. I'm very concerned with the state of our
Mhm.
our geopolitical perspective, although I'm very grateful we have someone like Donald Trump versus the previous administration who is tackling these issues. But I'm very unnerved by what's happening from a geopolitical perspective. But even domestically, I'm grateful for Doge. I'm grateful for the disruption of business as usual. But we still have a lot of people who don't fully understand the moment that we're living in. And I want to share that message. I want to get people to wake up and to know that this is their country. And either we stand in this moment, or I'm very concerned about the state of our nation.
I mean, I think it's amazing that you just decided to run. I was talking to a friend of mine who's thinking about running for mayor of the county I live in here in Florida, and I just thought, how do you even know where to start? Like that's just not the end, that the side of things that I understand or could even fathom. But then to describe all these people volunteering to help you, and working alongside you for no pay, but for the mission. I mean, that's pretty amazing. I mean, we talk about here at JCN, like this is a mission for us. But we obviously can't do it for free. We do ask for folks to
Right.
support our mission, but we can't do it for free, but it is a mission for us. And it is a mission to help save America and save that American dream. Speaking of which, brings me to a quote that I saw in your bio that I just love. It's, "I don't ask to be admitted into the American dream. I am the American dream." What does that what does that quote mean to you when you hear it?
Yeah. One, I did not decide to run for US Senate by walking into rooms and kissing the ring. This is my country. I believe this is my country, as well as it is anyone else's country. Now, if we go back to where I grew up on that little pig farm in southern Alabama, I have the blood of slaves coursing through my veins. I'm very familiar with my great great grandmother wrote a story. She was a slave, and I grew up in the same house that same house I described is her house that she lived in. And yet I come to this moment fully aware of the good, the bad, the ugly things that took place in this country. And yet I stand here saying, this is my country. And I'm grateful to be an American. I love this nation. When I went into the military, I made a conscious choice, a conscious decision that if I was called upon to lay my life down for this nation, then I would. But now I'm looking at the investments so many people before us have invested in this nation. And I'm looking and I'm standing because now it's on my watch. It's not on my grandma Rhoda's watch any longer. It's not on our founding fathers. In the Republican Party, we love calling out our founding fathers. Guess what? They're dead. They're not here any longer. They did what they were supposed to do when it was on their watch to do it. And they did it at great peril, many of them. And yet they made huge investments, and we all stand on their shoulders. And I say to my children all the time, we have a debt to repay to those who have come along before us, who held out faith, who put in the hard work so that we can be the beneficiaries of the lifestyle that we're living today. I am no longer on that pig farm, and I'm grateful for it, but I didn't get here by myself. And so that is what I mean by that. I did not ask to be admitted. I am an American. This is my country, and I believe that we each have a role to play. I am seeking my role. I thought my role was going to lead me into the halls of the Senate, and we were about to win that race with less than $2 million being spent in that particular race, but it was all empowered by the people. That did not take place. So now I'm standing here believing that my life has value. Our individual lives have value. I have a role to play, and I am keeping my head on a swivel to see what my next mission will be. And I think that that is the kind of energy that our founding fathers had. Alexander Hamilton is one of my favorites of our founding fathers. Our stories are very similar in many regards. And I think that's the kind of energy and hope that we have to have, even in the darkest times.
Absolutely. And you're right. Americans, I think that Americans are very concerned at the end of this Biden administration where we are and the direction that, we were truly at a fork in the road on where we could have gone. And here we are staring at this tax bill, this reconciliation bill, that is making its way through the sausage making. It's like the Democrats truly don't understand the devastation that will occur, or they do. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, or maybe I am.
Which probably means you are.
Like I told you before we went on air, usually when you start out with, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, you probably are. And it's probably because you've been proven right.
I know.
But maybe they do understand the devastation that it will cause if these tax cuts expire and Main Street is hurt. Because what's in this bill are things that they should vote for, or is nothing that they should be against. This is about lowering the tax rates. This is about providing, immediate expensing to small businesses. This is about increasing the tax deduction for small business owners who are what they call pass-through entities and pay at the individual tax rates, from 20 to 23%, and allowing them to keep more of their money so that they can invest it in their businesses. And the reason why the Democrats can believe that that's what's going to happen is because it's what already happened when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed in 2017. So imagine what will happen if we allow them to keep even more of their money and invest in their businesses. And the immediate expensing is another way to generate and encourage investment in businesses in their business by buying equipment and hiring new people. But it's not just that. It's no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Those are things that obviously President Trump promised on the campaign trail. He's delivering on. And it feels like we're fighting within ourselves. And we don't need to, because we've got some folks in our party who are letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And if you remember back in 2017, this is exactly what happened, because this is exactly the same phrase I used. I said, you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. This is a good bill. And the reason why it's a good bill is going to keep a massive, one of the largest tax increases from being hoisted upon the American people, ever in the history of this country,
Right.
if they let this tax bill expire. And the Democrats, I believe they understand what will happen if this
Yeah.
is allowed to expire.
These are not ignorant people. I've spoken to many of them. I've spent a lot of time with a lot of these people. They're not ignorant. But let me just say before I go on, sometimes people say, conspiracy theorists. I honestly, and I use that term just in banter, and I know you do as well. But what it really is that we're observant. We're looking, and we're not moral. We're not so morally compromised that we can't look at what we're looking at and say, this is what I'm watching right now, and I want better. And so really what it is that we're just observant and we're not morally compromised to where we can, because I think a lot of these people in the Democrat Party, they are observant. They understand completely. But I believe to some degree, they're so morally corrupted that they just refuse to acknowledge this is what I'm seeing and this is the impact it's going to have on people. Just look at, I call her Ratchet Jasmine Crockett, right? Like when you see her prior to this year speaking, she doesn't speak the way she is portraying herself to be today. It's embarrassing. I don't know anyone who behaves like her. And I know a lot of Black people. I've been Black all my life. And I know a lot of Black people from all kinds of socioeconomics. I personally don't know anyone who behaves like that. And yet here she is on the highest stage in the world. And this is how she portrays not just herself, but a lot of people believe she portrays her community as well in this way. But if you look at all the videos that have come before, she does not behave this way. She does not dress this way with eyelashes you can see from across the football field. She doesn't do any of these things. She's normal. And yet now on this stage, she's portraying herself a particular way. And I believe it's all perfunctory. It's all theater. But it's not because she's ignorant. And I think that we can extrapolate that across the overwhelming majority of the Democrat Party, as well as across some members within the Republican Party. These people are not ignorant. They fully understand a lot of the things we're seeing, a lot of the beating of the chest is just performance art. And we have to be able to see that and call it out for what it is. I was talking to Senator Joni Ernst, who endorsed me, by the way, when I ran for U.S. Senate against Mehmet Oz and others here in the state of Pennsylvania. But I was talking to her the other day, and she said, as I'm sure you know and most people know, they do not expect one Democrat to vote in favor of this bill. Now, is this bill, the reconciliation bill, and specifically TCJA, perfect? Absolutely not. And are we going to get the entitlement cuts? I believe we should. And this is coming from someone who grew up very impoverished. We need to trim the fat on Medicaid and Section 8 and SNAP and all these other things. But do we have a Republican Party that has the spine for such a heavy lifting? I don't think so. But this bill is going to pass. And if this bill is going to pass, my focus is on the middle class. I was talking to Dr. Ben Carson a couple of years, maybe about a year or so ago. And we both grew up very impoverished. And I asked him, do you think if we were in that situation or previous economic situation today, we would be able to get out of it? And he agreed with me that we believe if we were back on that pig farm today, if he was back in concrete jungle today, it would be next to impossible for us to climb our way out of that situation. Just because not only, like I said, when I grew up very impoverished, no one told me I was a victim. Today, that's all you hear because you're Black or you're poor. Not even that you're poor any longer, right? You have multi-billionaires who are Black crying that they're a victim of something, but not just from a social perspective, but even from an economic perspective. Dr. Ben Carson and I both agree that it would be very difficult for us to come out of that situation in today's climate. And I believe in large part it's because that ladder that we use to climb our way out is being drawn up. And I think it's the same ladder that allows people from the middle class to move to the upper middle class and into the very wealthy. I think that ladder too is also being rescinded. I think the TCJA goes a long way as a leverage point, right? It's not perfect. It's not a silver bullet. But I do believe it is a leverage point. I rock climb with my children sometimes. It's a leverage point for me to put my finger so that we can be able to do the hard work next time and keep pulling ourselves to the next level. And so, honestly, I think that that's the situation that we're in, that this is not a perfect bill, but it is what is in front of us. We need to push to get as much as we can in way of those key provisions that you just outlined. And I think the time is now.
Do you think they're going to get it passed?
They're going to get it passed, but what they're going to get passed, how significant will the SALT reductions be, the SALT expansion or elimination be? I'm not sure. I think that'll go a long way in helping middle America, especially family formation. And some of these, I live in a high tax state. To no fault of my own, but here I am. And so how much they're going to give us is going to be $35,000, raising that deduction from $10,000 to $35,000. I'm not sure. Are they going to do the no tips on tax? I hope they do. Are they going to do no tips or no tax on Social Security? I hope so. No tax on overtime. I don't know. You got to find the money to pay for these things. I hope they do, but
they're not doing the no tax on Social Security. At least that's not how it's currently written in the bill.
Okay.
Not Social Security. Yeah. Social Security. They've got no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. They were not able to do the no tax on Social Security because they were trying to stay under that $4.5 trillion cost on the scoring from the CBO. And so what they did was they raised all the individual standard deduction, the married standard deduction, but they added an additional $4,000 deduction for seniors with income limits. Though for individuals, it's up to 75,000 for married couples, up to 150,000. You can take an additional $4,000 deduction. So they were able to do that, but they didn't hit the Social Security tax because of the cost of the bill. Which of course brings me to how they score the bill, which drives me insane because the CBO is incapable of scoring the bill.
Have they ever been right?
Well, they don't incorporate the economic growth that comes from when you cut taxes, revenues increase. I mean, it's been proven time and time and time again. Revenues increase under Reagan. They increase under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act during Trump's first term. And they will increase again if we cut taxes. But the CBO is incapable of scoring it. They score it statically. And that always gives the Democrats that talking point of this is going to be for tax cuts for the rich, and that it's going to increase the deficit on the backs of the middle class. It's not true. It's not true at all. It wasn't true in 2017, and it's not true now. And if you look at the revenues that came in, inflation adjusted, they increased. They didn't decrease. What has driven this debt and deficit is that we literally increased spending 50% under the Biden administration. We went from a $4 trillion budget to a $7 trillion budget, and it's COVID spending, and the Democrats don't want to go back to pre-COVID levels. Pre-COVID levels means no pandemic. We don't have a pandemic right now, so we don't need COVID spending.
Right. I agree. And yet I also believe that I don't know if the Republican Party has the capacity to cut. And that's the world in which we're living in. Do you know about the SALT tax? Did they increase those deductions? up to
I need to
35.
check that. You brought that up. I know that there was a discussion of that. I need to check the salt tax on that one.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
The last conversation I was having with some people that they were looking to take it to 35,000. Now, whether or not that remains coming out of Sunday budget committee, I'm not sure, but I think that that is an absolute must because again, we are so hyper focused on the top 10% and the bottom 50% that no one talks about the 40%. And I think the more we can put a focus on the 40%, and I believe salt, first of all, we should just eliminate it altogether, but I doubt we're going to eliminate it altogether. So therefore, you have to look at an expansion, bringing it from 10,000 to 35,000. Again, this is not perfect, but this bill is going to pass. And if it's going to pass, we need to make sure that the focus is where it should be. With some cap adjustments so that the top 10% do not continue to to benefit for some of these things, but putting the focus squarely on the middle class. But here's the reality: in a perfect world, and I believe Donald Trump is focused on that. When I hear Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, I listen to almost every time he speaks. I'm listening, and almost every time he speaks, he talks about Trump's agenda. Here it is: it's trade, it's taxes, and it's deregulation. And so that tells me they are looking at growth. We don't have the stomach to cut our way into a better situation. And I too believe we need to go back to pre pre pandemic levels. But who's going to do that? Democrats have nothing to offer us. They have nothing. I think I was talking to you at just a symbolism of Cory Booker sitting on the same stairs singing a crazy song, the exact same stairs that Newt Gingrich ran down, I don't know, 30 years earlier with a contract with America in his hand that a Democrat president later went on to bring those bills into law. So Newt Gingrich had a contract with America. This is how we're going to work for you. Cory Booker and the rest of the Democrat Party are singing Kumbaya songs sitting on their behinds, right? While the rest of us are feeling the squeeze on a daily basis. So they have nothing to offer us, nothing good. They have some things to offer us, but none of it will be good for the American people and our place in the world. And so we're looking at the Republican Party and we realize, again, this bill is not perfect. I believe we need to put a strong focus on growth. I believe Donald Trump is actually focusing on growth. And when I listen to Scott Bessent speak, that they understand we got to move the GDP from 2% up to around 3%. 3.5 would be great, but 3% growth in the GDP. And I believe that what he's done with trade, there's a lot of, I often say Donald Trump is juggling knives while walking a tightrope. A lot could go wrong, but a lot could go right as well if things line up. And I think that with all this reshoring of investments back into America and manufacturing specifically, I think that is going to be a net positive for middle America.
Absolutely. Well, I told you this before we came on that I think we could probably chat for 4 hours or so. But I want to take a couple minutes before we say goodbye to talk about your book, Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain. Tell us a little bit about that and where people can go to buy it.
Yes, my book, it went number one on Amazon. Very grateful for that. This is at a time that at the beginning of at the beginning of COVID, and it still managed to go number one on Amazon. Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain, being Black and conservative in America, and it's me telling my story coming from that pig farm to where I find myself today and what I have observed to be the truth. And one of the premises in the book is that this is right before the 2020 election. And I put out a warning that if Democrats should win in 2020 by hook or by crook, but if they should win, that we're going to see a lot of the things that we have gotten used to, unfortunately, seeing within predominantly Black communities. I looked at the Black community as a petri dish of what happens when Democrats have absolute control of everything. Mm-hmm. And I said, looking at the Black community as a petri dish of what happens when Democrats have absolute control of everything, that is going to spill out of predominantly Black communities. And we're going to see that same level of despair and debauchery begin to flow into every community throughout the broader American community. And that's exactly what we've experienced. Again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just observant. I'm just paying attention. And that's exactly, and I'm not a prophet. I don't consider myself to be a prophet. I'm just observant. I'm reading the tea leaves and I'm like, listen, let me tell you what's going to happen. And so that is what my book describes. It walks us through what is going to happen in different areas of our society. It is exactly what has happened. But then I also pivot and begin to talk about what it is we need to do to claw our way into a better situation. I've expressed a little bit of that here, but that is the plan. And I would love for people to go and pick it up. You can pick it up wherever books are sold. And specifically, you can go to my website at kathybarnette.com and you can order it and I will sign it, or you can go to Amazon and pick it up.
Well, thank you so much. Nothing to lose, everything to gain. You all should take a look at that book and purchase it and get a signed copy if you go to her website. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. And thank you all for taking the time to tune in. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get podcasts from. And we'll see you next time.